My brother once told people I was allergic to responsibility. Now he's asking if I'll co-sign his business loan. I said no, with a smile. My name's Ellie Brooks, and this is the story of how walking away from my old life meant walking straight into myself. Before we get started, where are you tuning in from? Are you in the middle of the morning rush or on a late night drive? Drop a comment below. You're about to hear everything that happened after I made the choice that changed everything. It started with a one-way train ticket and a dented suitcase that still smelled like my ex-husband's cologne. I arrived back in Maple Hollow, population 4312, and roughly that many whispers, on a Monday. Late spring, lilacs blooming, judgment in full season. The farmhouse looked smaller than I remembered. Then again, I was older now. Tired in a way people don't see unless they've carried things they never put down. My boots crunched across gravel as I passed the faded Brooks Family Farm sign still nailed to the fence. The paint was peeling, like everything else here, including my sense of pride. Joel met me on the porch, same stiff jaw, same raised eyebrow. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said, arms crossed over a Henley shirt like he was born to disapprove. "I did," I said, "and not just for the casseroles." He didn't laugh, just stepped aside to let me in. The air inside smelled like lemon oil and quiet resentment. The wallpaper hadn't changed, neither had the silence. I moved into my old room, the one with the slanted ceiling and faded posters from the early 2000s. It felt like a time capsule, sealed with teenage dreams and forgotten piano lessons. The mattress squeaked like it had something to say. Joel ran the farm now, what was left of it. Mostly he worked in town, flipping houses and flipping off people who annoyed him. His wife, Dana, was kind enough. Polite smiles, stiff hugs. Their son, Max, was 12 and already taller than I remembered him being. The first morning back, I stepped outside with a mug of black coffee and looked at the shed. It sat at the edge of the property like a forgotten memory, small, wooden, locked. My grandfather's sanctuary. He used to call it his thinking room. After he died, no one touched it. Not out of reverence, but because no one had the time. "You're not thinking of messing with that, are you?" Joel asked, walking up beside me. "Maybe. It's full of junk. So was my apartment. I still found a way to live in it." He looked at me sideways. "Just don't break anything." That was our rhythm. Thin tolerance, brief exchanges, and the unspoken agreement that I'd disappear again eventually. But I didn't plan on disappearing this time. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for in that shed, or in myself, only that something in me refused to stay locked up any longer. And if Joel thought I came back to fall apart, he was half right. Because sometimes you have to fall apart in the place that made you to realize it doesn't get to remake you. The second morning I was home, I picked the lock on the shed with a hairpin and a memory. My grandfather used to say nothing worth doing came with easy access. Turns out, that includes your own healing. The hinges groaned like old men protesting the weather, and dust spilled out in a lazy cloud. It smelled like cedar, oil, and thyme. Sunlight slipped through a crack in the roof and landed on a workbench covered in rusted tools, jars of nails, curled notebooks, everything right where he'd left it. I didn't step in at first. I just stood in the doorway and stared, like I was intruding on a sacred place. And maybe I was, or maybe I was finally coming back to the only part of this house that had ever made space for me. The shed was where Grandpa Walt used to disappear every afternoon after lunch. While the rest of the family chased harvest schedules or football games, he'd tinker in here, fixing radios, sketching inventions that never made it past the blueprints, building bird feeders for neighbors who didn't ask. I remember one time when I was 10, he let me stay past dark while he soldered wires into an old toaster to try turning it into a clock. "Why?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Because no one's done it yet," he said with a wink, "and maybe it'll make breakfast feel less rushed." I sat on the floor and flipped open one of his notebooks now, nearly 20 years later. His handwriting was still firm, looping, pages full of diagrams for strange contraptions, Some half-built, some barely started, a rainwater collection rig for the community garden, a seed swap kiosk that looked like a vending machine for vegetables, a rolling library cart shaped like a barn. It hit me like a quiet kind of grief. He wasn't building for fun. He was building for people, for this town, for the future. And no one had touched any of it. Maybe that's why I started with the library cart. It was the simplest, and something about it felt needed. I went into town, bought lumber, screws, paint, and borrowed Joel's drill without asking. He noticed, of course. "You're building something?" he said one afternoon, eyes narrowing as he walked past the open shed. "Trying to," I said. "Just finishing what Grandpa started." Joel didn't reply, just walked off like he always did when he didn't know where to put his feelings. By the end of the week, I had a small red and white cart with 4 shelves, a weather-resistant cover, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Take one, leave one, read often." I wheeled it down to the corner of our road beside the mailbox and filled it with whatever books I had left from the move. Kids showed up first, curious, quiet, polite. Then a woman I didn't recognize left a note in the cart. "Thank you. My daughter found her first book here." I held the note in my hand for a long time, and for the first time since I got back, I didn't feel like I was just home. I felt like I was useful. By the 3rd week, the library cart had its own rhythm. People came and went like clockwork. Mornings for kids, afternoons for retirees, evenings for working parents. My name was never mentioned. That suited me just fine. I added a small weatherproof notebook beside the shelf labeled Notes and Requests. People started scribbling things like, "Any cookbooks?" or "More mystery novels, please." A teenager even drew a comic about the mysterious book lady of Maple Hollow. I didn't correct them. Let them wonder. It felt like I was part of something again, even if I stayed invisible while doing it. Back at the house, not much changed. Joel still treated me like I was a guest with an expiration date. He'd leave for work without a word, return in the evenings covered in sawdust and short tempers. Dana was kind in passing, but distant, as if being too warm might somehow invite me to stay longer. And Max, well, Max was a kid, still figuring out if I was cool or broken. One evening, while washing dishes, I heard Joel on the phone in the next room. "Yeah, Ellie's back. She's doing some, I don't know, building thing, like a book hut or whatever, playing pioneer, I guess." I paused, sponge midair, water dripping from my wrist. He wasn't cruel, just careless. That stung more. At the store later that week, someone tapped me on the shoulder. "You're Ellie, right? The one with the little red book cart?" I turned, startled. A woman around 60 smiled at me. "My grandson comes every day. He didn't like reading before. Now he pretends he's a librarian, says he's going to organize the wild." She chuckled. I managed a small laugh too. I'm glad he's enjoying it. He is, and I just wanted to say, thanks. She didn't wait for an answer, just patted my arm and disappeared down the produce aisle. That night, I walked to the shed in the dark, sat at the workbench, and read through Grandpa's journal again. He'd written something in bold, underlined twice. "Small tools, big reach." I traced the words with my finger. People I didn't know were thanking me. Kids were reading. Neighbors were asking for things. Garden beds, benches, compost bins. Quiet ripples, gentle waves. But inside my own house, I was still a stranger. At dinner, Joel talked about a property he was flipping. Max mentioned a science project. I said nothing. "I saw a picture of your book cart online," Dana said suddenly, passing the salad. "Looks cute." "Thanks," I said. Joel snorted. "Guess your art degree came in handy after all." I smiled, bit my tongue, chewed my food, because that's what disappointments do. We absorb the hit and keep building, but deep down, I wasn't shrinking anymore. Not because they saw me, but because I did. And for now, that was enough. I didn't need recognition. Not really. But I also didn't expect it to come from a laminated flyer pinned to a corkboard in the post office. There, between dog walking ads and piano lesson tear-offs, was a headline in faded ink: Local Resident Sparks Mini Library Movement. Underneath, a photo of my cart. My cart. I blinked, then laughed quietly. The photo was grainy, but unmistakable. The cart's paint had chipped on one corner, and I'd recently added a small chalkboard sign. Need a break? Take a book. A week later, I was sipping coffee at the general store when a man with silver hair tapped me on the shoulder. "You're Ellie, right?" he said. "I am." He introduced himself as Dan Whitaker, principal of the elementary school 2 towns over. "Saw what you did with the book cart," he said. "We've got a rundown shed out back that's collecting dust. Think you'd help us turn it into a reading nook?" I paused, surprised. "You sure you want someone without credentials poking around your campus?" He smiled. "You have more credentials than half the consultants we pay." And just like that, I had another project. I sketched designs on graph paper in the shed late into the night, using Grandpa's old ruler, the one with his initials carved in the handle. I didn't tell Joel, not because I was hiding it, but because I was tired of explaining the obvious to people who still thought I was lost. One afternoon, as I was loading lumber into my car, Max came out holding a juice box. "Why don't you tell Dad all the stuff you're doing?" he asked. I looked at him. "Would it matter if I did?" He shrugged. "I think it's cool. You're like, building stuff that helps people. Not everyone does that." I ruffled his hair. "Thanks, kiddo." A few days later, I dropped off the design mock-up at the school. Dan clapped me on the back and said, "Ellie, I hope you're ready for attention. The state education office saw the flyer and wants to fund 5 more just like it." My throat caught. 5. I said thank you, shook his hand, and walked back to my car in a daze. That night, at dinner, Joel mentioned the mayor had called him. Said someone from the school board wants to talk about your little cart thing. Didn't realize you were making headlines. I nodded. Neither did I. Dana raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you're the one building all those mini libraries?" I kept my voice even. "Yeah, been working with a few schools now." Joel stared at his plate. For once, he had no comeback. I didn't gloat. I didn't boast. But I did smile. The real kind. Because something was shifting, not in them, but around them. The silence they used to dismiss me was growing heavier. Not because I demanded space, but because I'd made one, and they could feel it. And for the first time, I wasn't sitting at that table as the family mystery. I was the story they hadn't thought to ask about. The school shed project was finished by mid-fall. We painted it barn red, strung solar lights along the roof line, and stocked it with shelves full of donated books. Kids lined up on opening day like it was Christmas morning, and I stood off to the side, pretending the cold wind was the reason my eyes watered. When the local news came to do a segment, I didn't mention the farmhouse. I didn't mention Joel. I talked about Grandpa Walt and his sketches, about community, about access. Afterward, the principal handed me a folded note. From one of the 3rd graders, he said with a smile. In shaky pencil, it read, "Thank you, Miss Ellie. I didn't know books could live outside." That night, I returned to the family shed, the one I'd first opened with a hairpin and hesitation. I sat at the workbench, ran my fingers along the worn wood, and looked at the wall where I'd started pinning photos of every finished project. Book carts, reading nooks, seed cabinets, each one like a quiet chapter in a story no one thought I was writing. Dana knocked gently on the frame. "You decent?" I nodded. She stepped inside, handed me a thermos of tea, and looked around. "You've made this place yours," she said softly. I smiled. "Grandpa built the bones. I just dusted them off." She hesitated, then said, "Joel's been different lately. I think seeing your work, it's got him thinking." "About what?" I asked. "About how much he missed," she said. The next day, Joel appeared at the shed mid-morning, holding a toolbox awkwardly, like it might bite him. "You need help building the one for Pine Hollow?" he asked. I paused. "You want to help?" I've got the time, and I know I've been kind of a jerk. Kind of, but I nodded. Sure, I could use the extra hands. We worked mostly in silence that afternoon, but it wasn't the old silence, the one filled with tension and judgment. This one was softer, muted, like the first warm breeze after a long winter. The night before Thanksgiving, my mother called. She never called. I saw you on the news, she said. At the school. Oh, I replied, bracing. You looked like yourself. A beat passed, then another. I think we never really knew who that was, she said. I think I didn't either, I replied. We didn't say much else, but we didn't have to. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen sipping coffee when Max came bounding in, holding his tablet. You're on the internet again, he grinned. Like, viral. Someone called you a rural literacy architect. I laughed. I've been called worse. At dinner, Joel introduced me to a neighbor as my sister, Ellie. She runs a nonprofit that builds cool stuff for real people. Not perfect, but it was a start. Later that night, I taped another quote on the shed wall, one of Grandpa's favorites. They'll say you came back with nothing until they realize you returned with everything that mattered. And underneath it, a photo of a child reading under fairy lights, a smile stretched across his whole world. My world. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult family decision that changed everything? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. If you're into real-life family drama like this, make sure to subscribe for more.